What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another HR Heretics segment. We have friend of the pod, long time no talk, Colleen McCreary. What's up, Colleen?
Hello. I'm still a listener. Yeah. I may not have been a participant, but I am an active subscriber to the pod, and I sometimes yell at you in my car. How about that?
I know.
And she'll text us.
Then I text. Although I've held back recently, but I occasionally have
Do you know why she's held back, Nolan? Because she works. She works full time.
She has a job.
Unlike the rest of us, degenerates, she's working full time.
I was going to say, I don't get many hate texts anymore, Colleen.
I have too much. I am busy. And by the time I can get around to actually saying, what the hell did you say today? Why did you say that? I have lost the motivation.
In all seriousness, do you remember the last time you yelled in your car during an episode and what it was about?
Well, the most recent one I listened to was the Jamie Dimon episode. So I'm actually pretty caught up, I think. Yeah. And I actually work for a all remote company now. So I am in this like complete opposite world. I did agree 100% with Nolan. And I think Kelli, you also said like, I think that was totally scripted. I don't think Jamie Dimon does anything without thinking about it 10 steps ahead of time. That man is way too wise to the world. And I, agree. You all have said the same thing that I have said, that it's all about expectation setting and being clear about who you are and what you're promising. And I actually thought you were a little nicer than I thought you would be in that episode about letting people off easy with Kelli. You were very generous about the like, well, people got comfortable and they just assumed they'd get to like work from home forever. And they just built these expectations that this is the way of working. And I think I'm overly sensitive on that topic because when it was the very hip thing for everybody to be remote, I was the head of people at a company that was very much requiring everybody to go back to the office and having to hold the line on that, and was very clear with people, do not move. You are going to have to come back. This is our choice. This is our way of working. And also saying like, if this isn't for you, you should go work somewhere else. And at the time there were a lot of other options for people, unlike kind of right now. And so I think I feel just probably an ounce of bitterness around this, of having taken so much crap. But also feeling like I was very authentic and very honest with people, during that time. And I'm very proud of the fact that that company was so honest and with people about this, was not willing to, lie to people or pull the rug out, because that's what I think was the crappiest about so many of these things, that Kelli, to your note, like these people got very comfortable and in many cases were told they were Amazon or Google or Robinhood or all of these companies that were told we're remote first. You should go live wherever you want. We're totally cool with it. And we're like, nope, not anymore. Back in the office right now.
The whip sign was insane. And this isn't the topic for today, obviously. So sorry to ask the question, but it's so funny because you were episode number 2 on this podcast, years ago now, I think, at least 1 year ago. And clarity of identity. You know what I mean? It's so interesting because
it's a common theme.
It's the thread that goes all the way through. But and it just depends. You're a CPO now at an all remote company, and you are the one saying we're in your other company. So it's just so funny how this industry works, and you can be in any situation.
Both work. It turns out both work, right? Like Colleen's very principled.
Halvesies don't work. Halvesies don't work.
I disagree. Like those companies that Colleen just mentioned are still hiring. Like people are working there, right? They change their minds.
I mean,
sucks.
If you're kind of doing both, changing your mind is different than we don't know which one we are.
Yeah, I guess that's right. All right, so let's set the scene for people, which is
I guess that's right.
Colleen, you're back. You're now back as a chief people officer again. God knows why. I'm not going to ask you, but I do want to ask.
I have a whole blog post if people are really curious on my blog.
Yeah.
I wrote about why I
It's
went
actually
back.
very good. I'm giving you shit. Okay. I want to know from the last time that you were in the seat to now, what has changed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the company, there's the mindset, and then there's just sort of the world, right? So, the world has changed quite a bit because the last time I was in the seat, it was still this sort of great resignation time frame.
Right.
And now we are in the no resignation to some extent time frame. No, I don't think that is fully true. I'm obviously taking the extremes, and when you make this your little LinkedIn soundbite and I get hammered all over the place, there's plenty of attrition to go around. And the cyclical world that, as I am old, will tell you is that, like, having gone through this in 2000 when sort of the dot-com bomb happened, and 2008, 2009, and maybe some blitz in the mid, 2000 teens timeframe, like, I know that it will come back around, number one. And I know number two is that top talent always has a place to go. Like, the best people always they're always sought after. It doesn't matter what role you are in. It doesn't matter where you are at. Like, you will always be, people will always be fighting for you. So I know all of that is true. And I see it in my own company, where I definitely see people who make the choice to opt out and find other things for all different reasons. So I am still very attuned to that, but the degree of which that was happening before, and that sort of dynamic of, sort of which you all have spoken about in many of your episodes, of the employee to employer control, has definitely shifted. Whether or not the employer chooses to grab those reins and how tightly they want to grab them and how much power they want it. And I mean, I think that's company to company and how they sort of implement that. And then, my own philosophy as a chief people officer, like, who would I work? I would never work somewhere that sort of is that kind of hard ass place in that way, like, abuses that power. I think you should still be principled and valued, and, like, we're making decisions for these reasons and give the context, but certainly I'm seeing it all over the place in a way I had never seen. I am seeing this shift, and we had already been seeing this when I wasn't an operator, when I was in the investing kind of world. But the shift away from sort of, tilting all the way too far, I think one way on DE&I, to another direction of, like, all the way the anti-DE&I. I was seeing that already in Silicon Valley, and I think the sort of national conversation obviously shifted in a whole different way. So that has definitely, like, the ground has changed, and now there's Nolan has seen some text on this, but, like, certainly, like, the amount and lack of clarity kind of nationally, state to state, internationally, what that does to you, how you respond, what you need to do, like that, just in the last 6-8 weeks. So, like, what your world looks like, I would not have predicted that, that sort of scenario. And then just, I think what has not changed, I should say, at that sort of big level is that there are companies that I think are really good at appreciating what HR is and what the expectation of a chief people officer is. And, and I, of course, feel like I would only choose to work at those companies that has a strong appreciation for that. And I think certainly that where I chose to go had an understanding of that. But just the dialogue that still happens, amongst employees and managers and leaders around what's HR's responsibility, what's the manager's responsibility, what's the company's responsibility. It just continues to crack me up some days, and now the difference between 2.5 years ago or whatever to now is I have a college student. So now I am very focused on, I'm going to have somebody in the workforce soon. And, like, what does that mean? And how do I'm actively thinking about this all the time. Like, I am soon going to be the parent of somebody who is in someone else's workforce.
Yeah.
So
one theme you just hit on there, which I've been thinking a lot about, is what is the job of a chief people officer today? And I actually think there's deep misalignment with that. So when you started, like walk us through your first like 90, 120 days. Like, did you try and create alignment on that company wide, and what did you do?
Yeah. So I always think it depends on what kind of company you're joining. If they've had a chief people officer before, if they haven't, are you following someone's footsteps? Are you not? Are you establishing the role? The company I joined is a public company. So I think that that's important context. We have employees in 30 countries around the world. They've been around for 10 years. They have had 2 other chief people officers. So it's not like somebody hasn't been in the role. I am a very different flavor of chief people officer than has been at this company too. So there is certainly that. And I will tell you, I also have a very public blog. I have a lot of podcasts, including this one that was on the record. So it's not like when I was announced that no one could know anything about me. So that's also, I think, a nuance. If you think about it, like if you have a public persona, you should think about the fact that your employees are probably going to dig up that public persona. In fact, I don't think I had been announced for 2 hours before someone pulled up a clip from Silicon Valley, the TV show, and said, "Is this you?" And it's true. Like it is on my LinkedIn. It's something that people often make jokes about. I think it was even in like the introduction that like, oh, she was a character there's a character based on her in Silicon Valley. And so, sort of that kicks off something. And so, I think in my case, there's a little bit, which is helpful. Like there's some context out there that sort of opens the door. And I had that conversation with the CEO in the process of the fact of like, I am not going to come in as this white page that no one knows anything about, because I have this very public presence and my beliefs and philosophies are out there, which are not all in alignment with the CEO. So there's some questions there.
Colleen, can I ask you a question? How did that like very public brand, which of course did you see that or feel that more or less than you thought you would when you joined? Like, did your reputation precede you? Did people know? Did it impact your integration? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think it helped because it took the mystery away. Yeah, and I'm also very transparent, so I really tried to lean in with my own HR team around like the AMA, and I'm usually a completely non-anonymous person. I hate anonymous anything. But the first couple meetings, I allowed anonymous just because of this, like, you never know. I mean, I am a little scary. I can come across as having very strong-willed and a lot of strong opinions. So I was much more open to it initially. And now I, of course, done away with
Of course it's gone.
Yeah, but initially I allowed it for a while to create some form of trust and confidence.
Safety.
You got to create that environment. Yeah. And they had been through a lot of change. So you have to recognize where your own team is, where the company is, what has happened. So I think you have to put some context boundaries. So I think it helped in that way. And then, my first all hands with the whole company, I was willing to sort of answer whatever. And we established an Ask eStaff channel, which is a sort of legacy thing that I have had at a couple of other companies and I was willing right out of the gate to answer not just about myself, but like philosophically what I thought. And I clashed with my CEO, and I think my first all hands or my second one, we clashed on philosophically around performance reviews. So it was, I think, a good interaction to like kind of see us publicly say,
be
like,
human. Be human.
Yeah,
have
like
human
we
conversations.
don't necessarily agree. We're gonna work through this. We haven't decided on the road ahead. We didn't agree in the interview process. We decided to put a pin in it. We're gonna try and get to try and influence each other on our point of view. Like
totally.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deal, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelli sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
So I don't believe in hiding who I am. I can't at this age. Like, I'm just life's too short, and I've been doing this for too long. It also helped, I will say, when you have whatever reputation you have. I think early in my career, I tried to run from it more. And, like whatever shit is on Blind that I've never read and I've never been a member of, so I don't really know what it says and whatever. Or what's on Glassdoor. People are going to know someone who knows someone. It's been helpful to me now that there are ex-employees who have worked with me over the years. And I do know that a couple people said like, oh my God, I worked with her before and I really liked the company she worked at, which was kind of a nice thing to have. I'm sure some other people said the opposite. She's a horrible human who made my life miserable. I don't know. You can't make everybody happy or else you're failing, in my opinion, as you all also, I think, see. So, but the other thing is, like, I literally did 200 one-on-ones across the company. 200 one-on-ones in my first 60 days. I wrote up just like I always do, I did a 6-page Amazon style of like, here are all the themes that I heard. I triangulated from the employee survey some themes. I talked about them, what I was hearing in all hands meetings. So I did not shy away from like, here are some things I'm hearing. This is what I've heard, what I read in the employee survey. This is what I'm planning to do and why. The other thing though, I think that made me actually very popular very quickly at this company. And the biggest thing is like, you got to put wins on the board and like, just
exactly
going after shit.
Prove value.
And in my case, like, I joined this company and, like I said, they're 10 years old. They went public. They're like 6 or 7 years. So unlike a lot of companies, Silicon Valley companies, they actually went the opposite. Instead of holding out, they like went public. And when you go public, there's a lot of constraints that are put on you in different ways. You have to put a lot of process in. And I really respect that they had the courage to go do it. And then, we're a SaaS company and SaaS companies got hit pretty hard in like 22, 23 when there was this like profitability hit. So they had to like really change the business as well. And so kind of work towards profitability, which we just started hitting. And so, I mean, really talk about adapting and watching your stock price go up and then go down. And I mean, just so many things that in a short period of time that I was sort of referring to us as Doogie Howser. And in the sense I meant like we grew up really quickly, but we kind of skipped some growing up and life experiences you probably would have had as a teenager that you didn't really go through that we kind of need to go back and do. And in some ways we like overdeveloped and we had a lot of like process and policies and things that I just were like, this does not make any sense. And so I had been there maybe a month when I was just talking to our CEO and I was like, there's just too much bullshit here. Like 10 hours of training as a new hire. There are like 9 steps to get something done in a work day. Like just so many things that I was like, I've worked at lots of public companies. I've been the chief people officer. It doesn't have to be this hard. And he was like, yeah, I kind of think that too, but he's never he's founder CEO. He's never done it before. And he's just been like, well, this is what I've told I have to do. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this hard. And so we established a company-wide OKR. I was 4 weeks in on removing the bullshit. And we set up just a Google sheet, and you can even put your name on it, or you could do it anonymously. And we set a goal for finding and removing 100 forms of bullshit in the company. And we just started going after it. I mean, and then we called it like the Hunger Games, a tribute in every, executive team members group. And as submissions, we'd track all the submissions. And as those things came in, we would just like go after them. And some of them were really small little things like around T&E and how you like submitted expense reports and making people's lives easier. Some of them were much bigger, like meeting audits. And like in the engineering team, I think we ended up saving like 4 hours of meetings per week for all engineers and like 7 hours of meetings just for engineering leadership, like things like that, or like changing password policies, or we got rid of, there was that like 10 hours of training as a new hire. We cut that down to 6 hours of training. So this is like substantial. If you multiply it down to the number, and then there were just like some really stupid rules that made no sense at all. And then you have to worry about like, do some of these teams feel attacked because you're like going after a lot of them were in HR. I mean, they were in my own world.
Yeah.
And how things were set up. So then you got to think about how do we broach this? And some things were just like lack of context. Like people didn't understand why we did things. And so I just every week go to the Ask eStaff channel and say like, this is the BS of the week that we're going to talk about. Someone said we should get rid of manager training. So I was like, hey, here's why we do manager training. Even if you've been a manager before, but we can take a look at some of the content. And then, we saw there's some abuse on the other hand. When someone doesn't like something at the company, a decision that they're made, they were like, this is bullshit. We shouldn't do this anymore. So now we have to like correct the other way, but it's still a goal. It's still an OKR for the whole company. Now this quarter, it's find 30 things because we were just like, this should not be a one-time thing. Like we should constantly be pushing on ourselves. But like, that was one, fresh eyes coming in and just saying like, it doesn't have to be this way and not being afraid to say that. And then looking for ways to do it, and how much better does someone like it when HR. Now, some people did submit feedback that they didn't like the fact that I used the word bullshit in the all hands meeting because it's a remote company and I guess their kids were in the room or whatever. And of course you can imagine, I did not say this, but you can imagine what I was thinking when I heard that word. I'm like, put headphones on or you're like at work, but okay. Point taken.
I think two things, Colleen, you said that I think are really important. Because I coach some heads of people or those that want to do this job. God forbid they want to get into.
We sign up to do it.
Yeah, and they feel daunted. Like I got to go in there and do some big thing. Quick wins does not mean you have to like turn the table upside down. It could be changing a T&E policy, like something that is motioning that you
low hanging fruit,
that you are paying attention and that you're a human and you can understand. So I think that's one. And the second, as you said, is so important because this is where it can be dangerous, is not shitting on the people and the work that came before you. So I just want to make sure people don't I'm going to go in there like Colleen and put on my Superwoman cape and say everything sucks. Like no one likes a know-it-all. So it's a balance. I guess some people do, but it's a balance between those things. And that's very nuanced.
Well, and Kelli, right? Like Colleen didn't know what happened beforehand to lead up to these things. Maybe it made sense at a time, right? This is like the analogy I want to use, which Colleen's going to hate, is like this is like Colleen's version of Doge. Like,
I hated that only because I did this before Doge and then Doge came out and I was like, I don't want to be associated with that. But
anyways, but the point is that like, you don't know what had happened up to this point. Maybe there were very good reasons, right, that these things had existed, but now it no longer makes sense. And it's important to look at things with fresh eyes. And, the other thing too is like, I'm sure with your team to try and teach them not to have sunk cost. Like just because we did this thing and we've been doing this thing doesn't mean we should be doing this thing moving forward.
Yes, all the time, constantly. And actually, in this case, I sort of appreciate what happened is like the likelihood of what happened was is they had built something or had some sort of training, and then somebody said, oh, we have to do this other training. And instead of going back and editing the first training, they just sort of added on and added. And no one ever stopped time to say, like, don't we already do this? Or do we have some other flavor of this? Or isn't this covered
Or
somehow?
maybe they were buried and didn't have time.
Yeah, or they didn't have enough people.
Things.
Or like people, you have like 4 people and this is all you can do. And you like do your best. And it's like, I'm not making any assumption as to why. I'm just saying, like, we can be better, and I look at myself and I'm like, and it's like doing a retro every time you do a new process. So, the other thing, Kelli, you mentioned sort of like being human was like, that was one of the goals I wanted to do too. We're a remote company. It's actually really hard to build community. Like, I actually think you're when you talked about the Jamie Dimon thing and the remote work, like, it's actually very hard to build community, and it is actually a lot harder to onboard. And one of the things you all kind of touched on that I am really grappling with right now is the fact that, like, yeah, sure, everybody was able to work remotely in COVID most of the time because you already had pre-established relationships with people, and then you just took them in. And that's why there was so much attrition for people who were like joining companies remotely immediately. Like, they just didn't know what to do or how to do it. And so if you want to be a great remote company, you got to set yourself up for that. And actually, like, this company, we are remote first. We got people all over the place, and we're still not great at that. So one of the things I had to point out was, like, we have nobody whose whole job it is to focus on this thing. Now, I have somebody starting next week who that is going to be their job. But the amount of time we talk about it, where I'm like, how is it that this is like central to who we are and no one owns this?
Yeah.
Like, those kinds of observations of like, someone's job should be, how do we create an amazing remote experience for everyone?
Yeah.
3,100 people kind of everywhere all the time. And they sort of understand, like, how do you really do? Because honestly, there aren't a lot of great blueprints as much as we've had pieces and parts. And there are a couple of companies here and a couple of companies there. But anybody who says like, oh, I did it in COVID, I'm like, yeah, not the same.
Not the same. Totally.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you both. You can disagree. This will be great. I'm just going to throw the fodder out, but I don't believe there will be remote companies like 5 years from now without incredible blueprints on how to get people together in the right way at the right time. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about a very complex schedule of humans or teams or cross-functional teams at the right moments that matter. For those of you who are at Pendo, I invented MOMS, moments that matter. That's going to be a big blueprint. And I think you said it, it's kind of like making tenure with someone. If I've hung out with you for a while and I get you and I have that, Nolan and I, we don't need to be in person for a long, long time, and it's okay. But if like I didn't know him before this and just met him,
oh yeah,
it's just hard.
Well, so I didn't know him before this for a long time, and I was like, who is that asshole?
Yeah,
totally.
I still say that, except for the who is this? But I think a big, it's with love. We're brother and sister. I think a big part of the blueprint is going to be, how do you work remote and get people together when it matters?
Yeah. Yeah. But I do think the humanity side of these things, and as much as I have that other reputation, like, I do care a lot. Like, and it is important to me that people know that. And even to the note of like, when I first was joining, there were a lot of the big climate disasters in the United States and in Spain and those kinds of things. And I remember saying to somebody on my team, like, hey, I want to send a note to all the employees who are in the zip codes where are being affected. And this employee on my team was like, oh, we don't do that here. And I was like, we do today.
We do now.
Like, we do now, like we do today. And I don't care that it's Saturday. Like, you go find the list. And I started updating every exec team. Like, this is how many people we have. This is how many is affected. Here's the template that each, HR person is going to go send to the people. And this, I sent a note personally. Then we followed up. Then we knew who was affected. We knew how they were affected. And then we found we had holes in the system. We had hourly employees, but we didn't have a process for them to get paid when they had to take off leave because their house had been completely flooded. Like, it was just a gap in the system. If you're so used to having, salaried workers with the kind of unlimited, take your own vacation, but you have hourly workers who don't fall into that bucket and they have no home. What do you do for those people? Like, then you got to fix the problem right away. Like, those kinds of moments in life that you're like, crap. Those, which maybe everybody listening are like, of course, HR lady, of course we all do those kinds of things. But I was working somewhere that wasn't the thing, you know? And I was like, no, we do that now. We do that all of the time. We do it, you know, we make sure that everybody is aware. I keep the leadership team aware. And they were so happy to finally have like the update. How many of my people are involved? No one was doing that. Like those things matter too.
Yeah.
What
and then,
you do better
way,
than it. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, then by the way, the other thing is like the other big thing on the list was no one understood at this company how they were paid. You know what we just did? We just changed compensation for everybody, because if you don't understand how you're paid, that's a big problem at a company. I don't care how missionary you are. Like, we're going to fix that.
How long have you been there?
I'll hit 6 months in a couple weeks.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Kelli has an existing appointment, so she's going to jump in a second. But I got to jump into some of this stuff, Colleen. So like, the thing I think you do better than anybody is continuous improvement, and you're not attached to perfect. Like what you're describing right now is like, oh, we just like did this thing, and then like, oh fuck, we found like a bunch of other things, and then we like made that thing better, and we just like keep making it better, which I think is exhibit A for how anybody should operate, but especially a new exec, because it shows humility. It shows that like you're not going to have the perfect solution, but that you're in constant working for a better company and like a better culture, and like you're just going to keep doing those things. The second thing is you did these one-on-ones. So like my eyes bleed like when I hear that, and I'm like, oh my God, like that sounds awful. But then you said you created this 6-page document, which I want to ask about in a second. And then you've been talking about what you've been hearing kind of like as the narratives in the company. So the 6-page document, did you share it only with the executive team or with the company?
Yeah, the 6-page document, I only shared it with the executive team and then the compensation committee, which is kind of like the people committee from the board.
Got it.
Yeah. But I think I've mentioned all of the themes that I found only because I pulled literal quotes.
Got it.
I did 2 versions. People might laugh at this. This is a good use of AI, where I used my iPad. So I was making the intentional switch where I used to always handwrite the whole time. I made an intentional switch to using my iPad and handwriting the whole time, which I then converted to text and then have AI translate and then pull out the themes itself and tell me what my notes said versus what I thought I said. Now, thankfully, they did sort of align, but I just wanted to see what ChatGPT would say versus what I was hearing.
If you could trust it,
Yeah. It was just kind of, it's hard because you're like,
spot
your
check.
Notes. Yeah, but your notes are not exactly the same, but you could at least do like kind of word cloud and stuff like that. So it was kind of a fun, and it was forcing me to get used to a new mobility and to use ChatGPT in a different way and those kinds of things. So it was kind of a fun exercise. But I literally pulled quotes from all of those one-on-ones as like kind of supporting documentation. And I just didn't think that those quotes were, you know, like I kind of didn't want everybody to read all
fill
of
out
that.
it.
And it's not really designed for that. I just felt like someone should get a summary, but I would reference that in all hands, or sort of when I would hear a question or something, I would say, hey, you know, you have a bunch of peers, or we would reference survey data for something. And I would say, yeah. And I've heard that from a number of you in these one-on-ones I've been doing from across the company. I haven't stopped doing one-on-ones. Like I did the first 200. And then now the one-on-ones, I'm trying to get through my whole 150 people in my organization. So I got to get to all of them.
Yeah.
And I actually still interview every single person who's interviewing to be part of my organization. So whether or not
obviously,
the workplace team or recruiting or whatever, I don't care where you are. If you're coming into the people organization, you still have to interview with the chief people officer. It doesn't matter if you're in India or Singapore or UK or the US, like you have to interview with me.
Yeah. I have to accent these one-on-ones before I jump. I know you will keep going, but I've done this in every company I've joined since GitHub in late 2013. And if it's below 300 people, it's everyone. And if it's above like 300, 350, it's like you said, chunks, samplings. But the goal is to meet with everyone. And there's multiple reasons for that. But I think what I just want to leave everyone with is the best thing you can do is what Colleen's saying, is to go in with transparency. No one expects you to be perfect. No one expects you to, but what you can do is tell them what you're doing, when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and most importantly, what the output is. Even if they don't like the answer, they will rally around you. And I akin it to like, if you're going down this long trail full of like weeds and bushes and thorns, you can like fight that trail with a machete every day and just like, or what you just did and what I'm talking about, it's literally like taking a tractor through the whole thing and clearing it out so that you can like go through it easier, because it just makes the job so much easier and people rally around you. You can like move more freely. It's so important. And by the way, secret sauce, you guys can agree or disagree. Boards love it. Boards are like, what? You met with 400, 500 people and you have, no one can argue. No, like I tell people all the time, the dirty secret is founders, boards. No one can argue with what people say, right? Like,
yeah.
My wife,
they can decide not to like it, but
my wife, my therapist, you can't tell me how to feel.
Yeah. And last thing we should say is that here's where you should use your network. I have someone on my board that Kelli also has had as a board member, and we've had a nice little set of therapy together just through text with that.
We have?
Yes, I texted you and you were like, oh yeah, that person knows everything all of the time, or thinks he knows everything all of the time.
Back to networks. Back to networks.
Colleen, like I want to have you back on to talk about the comp stuff, because like that's probably a bigger discussion. But just for people like to like break this down, is like Colleen starts, what does she do? She goes on a listening tour, but she's like also getting quick wins in parallel. Then she's like collating all of the learnings from the listening tour, factoring that in, coming the bullshit OKR, that's all time, Colleen. Like that's like so good. Like I can't, like people gotta love that, right? So like figuring out like a really big win that people will love early, right? And look, I mean, it's hard as a new hire in general. I think it's so hard as a new exec, especially at a company of 3,000 people, because you have to manufacture trust. And I think what you're doing right now is you're giving us the algorithm for how to do it.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, you still have to deliver every day on all of the other pieces, which is the other thing, right? Like recruiting has to work, comp has to work, benefits have to work. Like I was very lucky in that there were a lot of great people already there. So I didn't have to, I wasn't swapping out a lot of people. Like that was the nice part, which is I think a lot easier. A lot of chief people officers do not have that good fortune of having a good team in place. And so, but you have to be doing that too. You have to assess the team that you have. What do you have? And then remember, when you're on that management team, you're also assessing the rest of the leadership team and having to be that person for the CEO. And you have to establish that relationship and that cadence and how you two figure that stuff out. Yeah. And how do you become that person with your peers? And establish all of those relationships, and then start to form opinions about their organization. So, it's a lot. I feel for people when they're coming in that way. And this is a lot of, these are a lot of hard-earned lessons of having done it a bunch of times. Right. So, it's a little bit of good fortune of experience. And now I'm just better at it. But this is my first time coming into a public company. So this was a big, adventure for me. And maybe, one of the reasons, and it was one of the reasons, like, I don't know, it was like a bit of a challenge. Like I had never done it before. Could I do it? Would I want to, like a little, I'm definitely one of those people of like, I can do it. I think I can do it. So, but I need a little bit of a fear factor. Yeah. So
yeah, don't we all?
So I should, we want everybody to know, like it was new. This part was new. I had been in this role at public companies and one of them was slightly even bigger, but I had grown that company. I had been there from 100 people. I knew everybody because I was part of it, but going in later is much harder, and I wanted to see what that was like. So here I am.
Totally.
Figuring it
out. All right. Well, we're going to have you back in a couple weeks-ish because I want to have this comp conversation. Because touching comp in the first 6 months feels like you're really getting next to religion. So I'm excited to have that conversation. But Colleen, thanks for taking us to school as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was really fun.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.